Welcome to the Coffee Break Show today. You are not going to believe the empowering conversation we are going to have about a very interesting topic. And it's a tough topic to talk about. Today I have Cara Tuttle on with us. And she actually, you know what I'm going to do first? I'm not just going to welcome you to the Coffee Break Show. I'm going to do this in a way that everyone knows that this topic is so important for every workplace and everything we do. But first, as always, we have to hear the music. Otherwise, the producers get mad at me. All right, I'll be right back. You're on the Success Secrets for Business, Family, and Life channel. This is the Coffee Break Show. Today I have Cara Tuttle, and she has an extraordinarily, in my opinion, important job, a career that has to educate people on sexual harassments, sexual behavior in everything, not just the workplace, but everywhere, and how we can prevent it by having stronger, more assertive languaging. And I just want to welcome you to the Coffee Break Show first off. Thank you for being here, really.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here and to be talking about this.
Yeah, it's so important. And I got to admit, I've probably done about 600 shows, and I've never tapped on talking about this. And I think that it's such an important conversation. And I got to be honest, I didn't know there were any experts out there until somebody said, hey, we have this kind of person. You want them on? I was like, yes. So, Cara, I obviously want to know, how is it that you got into this topic, why you chose it as your passion, or something that you're so passionate about that you're out there talking, obviously, about this to, I imagine, anybody who'll listen.
It is anyone who will listen. You're exactly right. So I've been doing this for a while now. I am a lawyer by training.
Cool.
And I think early on, it wasn't something I was like, I'm going to do this exactly when I grow up. But along the way, I was like, I knew I was going to go to law school. I wanted to be a lawyer. I had opinions, I had a voice. But the women in my family did experience domestic violence. So it was something I thought, and I'll help them on the side. Like, I'll be able to help them.
Yeah.
I grew up in a very rural part of Indiana. And so the norm there was some acceptance, sadly, that these things happen, but a really private perspective. It's like, we just don't talk about them.
Yes.
And women have always helped each other, but it wasn't very public. And I didn't hear many messages about how this was wrong, that this shouldn't happen. And here's what you can do. So then I'm just a woman navigating the world also, feeling unsafe in certain situations, feeling like I wasn't taken seriously, especially when I was younger, experiencing sexual harassment when I was in graduate school and law school and some early careers. And what happened first was I was either like teaching political science or women's and gender studies. I then worked in university women's centers. So the narrowing has happened over time to where I've really been focused on this in the past 10 years. But what had happened along the way is I became a person from the Whisper Network, which has been a long time what women in particular have had, is like, go talk to Cara. She like won't judge you and will let you know like what your rights are and something to do. So in higher ed, when this became an overarching issue, and colleges and universities began devoting more resources to that, they started creating offices like the one that I run now. That really was, I had to take a weekend where I was like, oh, this is going to be tough. Am I going to apply for this? Am I going to do this? But I had such a sense of obligation where I was like, if I don't do it, I'm going to be so upset that someone else is. And it does keep me up at night. It makes me angry. I'm going to be honest. It makes me very angry, outraged, infuriated, but that is valid. And I try to turn it into fuel.
And I want to thank you for this, because we're talking about a subject that is almost so taboo to talk about. And I want to be as transparent with my audience as well. If you guys have read my book, The Ultimate Freedom, you know that I grew up in a house with domestic violence as well. I did something different. My degree is in accounting and finance, but I was a police officer for a while, thinking that I could find the perps. Now, I want to be really clear. This is not a conversation about we hate men, because sexual harassment happens to men and exploitation happens to men as well. And what we're looking at here, the conversation that we're going to dive into, isn't about blame. It's about empowerment. Now, what I want to ask you, Cara, is how it's like right now, how people deal with the aftermath of this kind of hush hush. How can we have the conversations in a different way? Let's just start with, how do we open up to the conversation of sexual harassment, sexual assault, sexual misconduct of any kind? Even I think it's not just in the workplace, it's everywhere. You could be at a restaurant or at anywhere. How do we start to begin to have the conversation in a safe, empowering way?
Yeah. Recently, right, if we think about Me Too and the surge of dialogue,
Yes.
Starting with some online Twitter activity, but then news story after news story, that really opened up space for people to talk about it. I mean, it was an act of solidarity, of saying Me
Yes.
Too,
Yeah.
right? So for many people, that was a start, but also I do want to make it easy, right? It can feel very daunting. It can feel intimidating. You feel vulnerable. You feel exposed. So just know you don't have to throw your story out into the world if you don't want to. There are easy ways to begin the conversation. Some of it's being a good friend. Some of it is simply like, if you're noticing a change in a friend's behavior, just check in on them. And you don't have to label something or go to extremes, and you don't have to use the terms even. You don't have to say anything like sexual assault, dating violence, domestic violence. In fact, a lot of the advice would be to not lead with that, because that's very scary and that creates a wall. Rather, let's use the celebrity stories in a good way, right? And hopefully they're distant enough that that's something where it's like a point of entry in the conversation. Now, I'm not saying let's debate whether or not something happened, but if this dialogue is out there, which it is really more than ever before, you can use that to bring it into your circle, whoever that is, with like your supportive people where you can talk about it. If you want to talk about your experience, I think people would be surprised by how well that can be received, and how often it is met with a Me Too, right? And so we find that there is then that shared experience, which can be very affirming and validating. But I would say choose your audience carefully, because if you think someone might not respond well, they might not be the safest person to broach the conversation with. And start with, go ahead and start small, and start with the easy, positive, uplifting, receptive people, because it is a tough topic and we want to take care of yourself while you're engaged.
Yes, because I think that's the issue. It's like, once an incident happens, we don't really actually know, because we're unwilling to talk about it. We don't know the procedure for beginning the self-care piece of it. And I agree with you, Cara, when we were, I just recently saw on TikTok a TikTok of a girl who was kidnapped at 8 years old. She's an advocate now, and she has a foundation where she talks about what happened to her and how she got over it and everything else. And she was like near dead. And so we're now looking at just, it's so prevalent in the world. I was just thinking of human trafficking when you were talking about it. There is so much of this, and we almost want to sweep it under the carpet, like, yes, it exists, but we don't actually want to talk about it. And here's the thing, I really love that you said you can talk about it if you want to. You don't have to talk about it if you want to. Let's start talking about some of the top, maybe 3 things that you teach people. I don't care if it's in corporations, or let's dive into the healing and empowering and how people can protect themselves from this, and let's start from there.
Sure. There are a number of things I would recommend, right? And some of which I teach, some of which other wonderful humans teach, right? And so again, start where you are. Start with what feels doable. So for a lot of people, that's reading a book. So if you want to read a book on assertiveness, start there. That's where I started. I mean, people don't believe it now, but I used to be shy and quiet. um, and I am an introvert, but I've learned to, engage. But I absolutely would read to myself and start with some self-learning in a very safe,
Yes.
private setting. Read the book. These books, and listen, there's a lot of assertiveness manuals because this really emerged in the 70s. We had a resurgence in the early to mid 90s, and I'm happy to be a part of and then see more dialogue happening. But assertiveness training is part of it because I do see a lot of people after an incident who are like, I didn't know what to do. And of course
Yeah.
not. Who's teaching you? Who has taught us, right? A lot of us have been socialized to be pleasant or polite.
That's correct.
Which has its place. It does. Let's be kind to one another. But you need to be able to identify boundaries. So I teach boundary setting and then some assertiveness skills to articulate those boundaries to another person. And I would just want to be careful. I want to pause here and say, sometimes assertiveness is not going to prevent a harm. Sometimes it's not. Some people are just trying to violate your boundaries and trying to overcome resistance. So this is meant to be something we can try to do sometimes that has been shown to be helpful, often in sexual harassment scenarios, not always in sexual assault scenarios, but also early on when they're testing the boundary.
Yeah.
So when you know the offender or a perpetrator is assessing the scene and trying to find their mark, they do some boundary testing. This is what the research tells us. And so for personal risk reduction, your response or your assertiveness can really be life-altering in that situation.
Yes.
Another thing I recommend, which is very empowering, is empowerment self-defense. Now, I have taken those classes. I do not teach those classes, but there are classes nationwide, and it's called empowerment self-defense. So it's a little bit different than some of the other self-defense classes or what you might be thinking of. There are a number of classes that are really designed to teach you some quick strategies of physical resistance if you're getting attacked by a stranger. And I would say, yes, and do that too, sure.
Yeah.
But empowerment self-defense teaches you verbal de-escalation, some assertiveness skills,
Wow.
exit strategies, and then also those
Cool.
physical resistance strategies. And it usually, it's often taught by women. It's really been embraced by women of color. It's not women's only. So these are really inclusive classes. Everyone, regardless of ability, can take these classes. That's another difference in some of the more traditional self-defense classes. And it's trauma informed and very culturally aware. So it's absolutely what I bring in, in my role to campus, to offer to other people, because they're doing it the best and most holistically that I've seen. So those boundary setting, assertiveness training, and empowerment self-defense would be the three things where I'd say, explore those. They're great places to start in any order.
Beautiful. I love this conversation right now, and I'm so curious. I was raised by a dad who was violent. He was violent with my mother, but he had 3 daughters, and he was super protective of us, really protective of us. And before we could go out on a date, we had to have at least a brown belt in karate, at least. And this was way back when girls didn't take karate. But we did. I guess he wanted us to be able to go out on the date, but then be able to beat the crap out of our date if we needed to, and that's kind of the thing. He was very, so I know there are fathers out there that have daughters, and I want to know, if you're a good dad and you want to give your daughter some assertiveness training, or to be able to have her say, these are my boundaries. I was very clear, if you touched me in a way that that was inappropriate, I had permission from my dad to be very strong and say, stop it, or I'm going to drop you. And I really have been fortunate with that. But most girls aren't taught that. They're taught exactly what you said, to be polite and this and that and the other. And I was taught to say, back off, you jerk, I'll, stomp you. And so what I want to know is, I want to know if you're a dad or a mom or a parent, how can we empower our children right now with maybe some verbiage like, no, what can we do? Like 3 examples of what you could say or do, or how you could teach them to have um, empowering, de-escalating conversation. Do you get my question?
I do. I
Great.
do. And I'm going to go a little bit before, go back a little bit and what needs to be created. They need to have room to feel angry.
Yes.
Our children need, well, everyone actually
Yeah.
needs room to feel anger. It's an okay emotion. It's valid. It's just sending you signals that something's wrong. And when we're teaching children, I mean, I hate the phrase seen and not heard.
Yes, I
From
grew up
where I
with that
sit
too.
in my job, it's such a dangerous approach to raising children. And I know it's very easy for me to say about other people's children is like, let them be heard,
Let them be angry.
be angry, but they need room to explore that, because if we shut it down every time, then they're not going to be able to access that when they feel like their boundaries being violated. So
Yes.
yes, it's more work for us to do, but what we want when they're not with us, so we can't protect them because we're not there, is for them to feel outraged on their own behalf and
Yes.
make decisions about leaving, about not needing to be liked. So if we're
Yes.
teaching all of this pleasantness, like to be pleasant, well-behaved, likable, they're getting the message that being liked in a social setting is more important than being
Then
who
there's
they really
safety.
are or being safe. And all of that in the uncomfortable moment, in the act of sexual harassment or sexual assault, creates delay.
Wow.
So I, always say things like raise angry girls, like let them feel entitled to safety and comfort and protection. Some entitlement's not bad. There's supposed to be more safety, more rights, more well-being than we had generations before and before and before. But let's not parent it out of them.
Yes.
I do work on a college campus, so I see lots of 17 to 24-year-olds.
Yeah.
So I see everybody else's kids, and they come talk to me when they can't talk to they feel like they can't tell their parents that they were out, if they were drinking, that they were maybe dating or past curfew. I mean, even though they're at college, a lot of students are very connected to their parents on apps and all sorts of things. So the parent-child relationship definitely follows them later in life, if you're looking at Gen Z, than prior generations. And so the contact is great, but you have to have a realistic conversation with them about what they're likely to encounter. Otherwise, they're absolutely going to come talk to somebody else. They're going to talk to a stranger that they feel like isn't judging them. Now, I'm happy to give them phrases. No is a great one. No means no. We got that. That was about the extent of any sex ed I got, but no means no, and that's still true. It is still true. But we want them to be able to say, not right now. This is making me uncomfortable. Can we just pause? And that's where they might be with a peer, and they're not sure about what they want to do. If they maybe were flirting or dancing together and then have gone back to a residence hall, for example. You want to be able to have phrases that they have access to. So practice is actually great. That helps disrupt or pause the moment, right? Because they are going to remain, even while being harmed, worried about what their peer thinks or what they might tell somebody else. They just do. So as much as I can sit here and be like, who cares what, this person who's harming them thinks, they do care. They do care. So us being kind of flippant, I'm 45. Thank God I'm not sitting here 18 anymore, right? But they are there. They are there where they are figuring out who they are, and they want friends, and they want to fit in. And so they're not trying to overreact and do the things we used to teach, which were to yell fire and knee your attacker in the groin, or, you know, these basic techniques that have never actually worked. They've never, I mean, try it, sure, but it's not reduced the rates of harm over the past 40 years.
This is so empowering a conversation right now. And I want to be as transparent as I can be. I'm really opening myself up for the conversation because I want other people to know that how it starts or how it goes up there. But my very first book that I put out, I'm an author and everyone knows I have books. So anyway, the very first book I put out, I was living in London because I had a London publisher. And I was on one of those double-decker London buses, and I was very overweight at that time. And when I was on the bus, I was standing there like, I don't know, reading something or doing something. And this guy was there and he wanted to strike up a conversation with me. And he was on the bus and he said, "Do you have a boyfriend?" And I was like, "Yeah, I do." And he said, "Would you be lying to me? Are you lying to me?" Like he wanted to test me. And I was like looking at him like strange. No. And he says, "I like your size." So there's that combination. And I was like, you know, the whole thing, I was like, what do you want me to do? Break out in a rash? So you approve of my size?
Mm-hmm.
So then he was like, "You're lying to me. You don't have a boyfriend." And what I did about the overreacting, I got on the bus and was like, "This guy is doing this. He doesn't even know me. He's doing this." You have to step out of your comfort zone and be like, "He asked me this. He asked me if I was going to do this. He's a predator. This guy's a predator." And I said it long enough for him to get off the bus. And, you know, to me, I get so angry. I'm the kind of person, I would get off the bus and start yelling it down the street. But I just stayed there, got off at the next stop and went to my home. But it's that thing. It's like if there's predation starting, then point it out, shout it out. Nobody wants to be in that thing. And it was like, the empowering thing of being polite and answering his questions and everything else. I'm an ex-cop, so I certainly wasn't going to play his game with him. But at first I was like, "You don't even know me. I'm in a country I don't even live in. Who are you?" And he didn't either. He was Jamaican sounding. So my want is to be able to say to women out there, every woman on the planet, no exception, knows what it's like to get her keys out at night and walk to her car and look around. Everyone knows there's predation around. How you handle that now needs to be in such an empowering way to be able to confront that. Now, I want to talk about this is tough for me because I have heard from a friend, there is a thought somehow that predation only happens with poor people and not rich people, which I think is a pile of doo-doo because of, you know, I just know. So the thing I want to talk about is I want to talk about how this harassment can happen. It doesn't matter if you're wealthy, middle class, poor, wherever this kind of thing happens. But I want to talk to all the wealthy women who think they still have to be quiet or be the arm candy for whomever it is, or you know, because I think there's a difference in wealth. So if you're in an abusive situation and you're less wealthy or with a less wealthy man or whatever, and you're somewhere and you leave, he can't follow you. But a wealthy man can follow you and follow you and follow you and follow you and harass you because he's got the funds to do it until he wears himself out. And to me, I think there's a lot of things where they think that privileged people, whether privileged by degree or income or whatever, race, privileged people don't suffer from this, only poverty people do. And I want to talk about the myths, some of the myths that people have about where sexual harassment is. And then I'm going to jump over and go into corporation stuff and what you teach and et cetera. But let's talk about that. And I want to talk to the women out there who are hiding, still in that role, not knowing what to do because they can be followed. I mean, what can people do?
Yeah, it is really tricky. And I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because it is absolutely true. I mean, it's very well documented that this cuts across all demographic factors and considerations and levels of socioeconomic status. Some of it's more visible than others societally. Some of it makes the news, some of it doesn't. Some of it is fodder for TV series, and some of it's not. But that's not backed up by the research, right? The research tells us that this occurs in all types of families and all income brackets, right? In all types of communities, in all religions. There are some factors that indicate like a likelihood of victimization or disproportionate impact, but nobody anywhere is immune from this. And we know that, right? Like we do know that because there's someone in our lives who've had the experience. There's whispers, if not stories that are being shared with you. It does get to be tricky. So resources do definitely matter if someone is trying to leave a relationship, and money can have that byproduct of strengthening the trap, right? Or the web. We definitely see this again with celebrities who are able to weaponize the system, right? I mean, and just hire lawyers after lawyer after lawyer and drag things out and avoid accountability. So that would be happening on a smaller scale, with the normal people that we know. It's very difficult the more financially dependent someone is on the abuser. So to start, you got to brainstorm ways to have some exit strategy. And I want you to be safe. So people will say, leave immediately. And that's actually very risky. Like if you're ready to leave with a plan, leave when trust your gut. My friends on campus who study brains in the body tell me that's our basal ganglia. That's actually science. It's not like an old wives' tale. It's our bodies telling us that there's a threat, right? So your experience best. Your abusive partner best. And be really calculated when you can to time this and build up whatever resources you have. They may not be money. They may be a trusted friend. They may be a community shelter. But you have to know that with the money or status comes this sense of entitlement of how dare you leave me or how dare you try, which can drive an abusive person for some time. So if you're doing internet research, I want you to be careful about that, right? I want you to do it privately. I mean, it's even better if you don't do it.
Library.
Exactly. Library, public places, somebody else's phone rather than your own or iPad or whatever it is you have access to, or at least clear the cache and sign out, if you can. Phone calls can be better than emails, right? So you could call the shelter and ask for information. So then there's not the written record, or just be diligent about deleting everything if you're asking for information. The crisis shelter, the community response team, these are people who have experience, right? Who will want you to be safe and will want to help you. That's why they exist. They are not always in the most useful part of town, no matter who you are, right? Because this is so underfunded just nationally that everybody's doing the best they can, but it's never quite enough. So, it's sadly about being very careful. Could they be tracking your car? Are they tracking you via an app? Even turning it off can send a signal where they're going to then come try to find you, So we can take a tactic that some of the students sometimes use when they don't want their parents to find them, is like they leave their phone in a certain place and then go do the thing. Now that's a risk, right? Because then you're going somewhere without a phone. But if turning it off is going to be more of a red flag or some signal, right? Then think about leaving the phone. None of this is ideal because the person's probably been purposefully disempowered, purposefully controlled. So there often are legitimate concerns and reasons, like when we talk through safety planning with people, which you would definitely know, like from law enforcement, is there's a very natural reaction of, yeah, but, and this is true. Yes, true. This may not work. This may not work. He could figure this out, right? But it's the flow chart of options, and that does mean sometimes there's an attempt to leave that doesn't work out and a person goes back. And so for those listening, I would say just really have compassion for that, because if you're not in the situation, you don't really understand what could be a very rational choice to go back temporarily, to go back and avoid the worst of the possible violence that they might be facing, to avoid if someone's been threatening to harm their children or harm their pet, right? Like these can be rational calculations. It's not always a person isn't strong enough to leave. Often you don't know the whole story. It could be
absolutely
a demonstration of incredible strength and resilience, actually.
Yes. And I'm so happy that you said that, because I think one of the worst things that we do is judge other people. Why don't you just do this? Or you think you have a fast solution, and it's not that simple. It's not that easy. Like my mother was in that relationship for 10 years. She had 3 small girls. How are we going to get out? How are we going to, and my dad did follow her. Once he found out where she went, etc., we literally had to leave the country without documentation, get out so he couldn't find us. And, like for years. So he, because that following piece is extraordinarily strong. I know there's a lot of women who are, I want to talk to the woman who's listening right now, and you're thinking, I need out, or you're thinking, I don't have a way out. Maybe you feel hopeless at this point. And I want to tell you that, Cara is really spot on when she says you have to have a plan. It can't be just like, okay, now's my chance to run. And you're going to have discernment, because sometimes your chance to run is what you have. But I want to talk to what would you say right now to the woman who is trying to create a plan or looking for an out, and I'm speaking to women because I think more women go through this. But if you're a man and you're stuck in maybe a gay relationship with someone and you're the victim as well, how do you get it? What can they do right now? What's some of the first things they can do?
Yeah. The internet does have a wealth of resources. And so know that your state, and maybe your county, maybe not, it depends. More urban areas have more resources typically than rural areas. But, visit rain.org, look for we have the Tennessee Coalition to End Domestic and Sexual Violence. We have a sexual assault center. They have a lot of information on there about safety planning and considerations. If I like to write things out, I would say only do that when you are, you have time and you have a way to destroy the piece of paper, because Absolutely. You don't want to create as much as to make the plan. You don't want to have that there to be found.
Yeah, no evidence.
No, right? Because you don't want, if they don't trust you, if they're controlling, they might go through your things anyway.
Absolutely.
And then you do need a support person, and that could be someone in your life, or that can be someone who does victim advocacy, or that could be local law enforcement, right? There are people who do want to help you, and just start with where that is. It varies person to person. Sometimes churches have a service, but sometimes that's not going to be the outlet for everyone, because what if the person's a deacon or an elder in the church?
Yes.
So you can't just trust the first thing that comes to mind. I want you to think through that. Who is there? Who will know? What are their hours? Is it really private? And listen, there are plenty of people who take their work seriously and know how high the risks are. There are also lots of volunteers, because this is an underfunded issue nationwide. So there's lots of volunteer organizations who mean well, but may know the offender, right? And so then that's not the one I would choose. If you go to the doctor and you're able to have your doctor's appointment in private, a lot of medical professionals have been trained, at least in the basics, and could give you some information. And that's a place where you should be able to be away from the abusive partner. Now, I have seen it. When I go to the doctor, a very nice nurse was like, he can come on back, said that to my husband. And I was like, no, he can't. I felt safe at the time, but I was just like, no, and I don't want to get anybody in trouble. They're just trying to be polite, but I want them to be able to do the screening that they're supposed to be able to do and ask me questions about weapons in the home, safety in the home. I mean, I'd fallen down the stairs, right? So I had gone to the walk-in clinic for x-rays. She should not have ushered my husband back in there because he could have caused those injuries, right? Then I could have been saying I needed x-rays as a cry for help and have been thwarted by a very good intentioned,
Yes.
So these are the things you need to think through. Where do you think you can land where you're going to have a supportive response? I know there's somewhere. It's very hard to be in the situation and know that, but listen, you can call me, you can find me, we will talk through it, we will figure it out. I really don't care where you are in the world. We will find connections and try to get you help that you need. It may take some time because, as Vickie and I are both telling you, a plan is crucially important, and the time of exit is some of the most dangerous times in the relationship. And so it is something we would want to get right. But there are people more now than ever who will believe you, who want to know just enough about your situation to help you plan. You don't have to get into all the details, but they want to know enough to create a plan that will work for you, who would really, really welcome your call or your email or your reach out or your text or whatever it is.
Okay, I'm going to shift now. I'm probably I want to shift into workplace violence or hostile work environments or feeling unsafe there, and what people can do, and how women can it's such a hard conversation because I think there are women that go to work and they flirt and and then there are women that just are not interested and, saying it. And I think these two dichotomies are part of the problem. And I also think, because I don't want to say this is a completely male problem and you should be blah, blah, blah. Because there are women who lie about stuff that didn't happen, and there are women who truly need help. And I'm going into the workplace right now because I think there's a lot of harassment that happens in the workplace. And I would like to talk about the types of harassment, not just harassment, figure out if you feel harassed, but if there are types of harassment that are clues that we should look out for, or that we may want to have a boundary around, or kind of nip it in the bud right then. And for both men and women, like if a woman starts playing you like that and you have no want for that, this makes me uncomfortable. You need to say something.
Yeah, absolutely. And nip it in the bud is the best advice. It just is like, that's what we know. There are different diagrams out there that I sometimes use where it's like the iceberg, and imagine the iceberg, right? So it's like the tip is above the waterline. Well, everybody knows, like when I'm working in higher ed or with nonprofits or like with, corporations, there are some things we know are wrong. And that's actually the easiest to spot. Same as if we're teaching bystander intervention strategies, which is just how you can do something rather than nothing if you see something happening. And there's some different strategies for that. Well, the problem is people are waiting for the most egregious thing. And we actually need the intervention or the addressing the behavior at the slightest thing. Now, people talk themselves out of doing that because they're like, oh, I don't want to overreact. Oh, it was just a joke. Oh, they might have just grazed. Maybe it was an accident that they bumped into my breast or whatever it could be. Again, trust your gut. And it's okay to have a misunderstanding. We can fix the misunderstanding if it were actually a misunderstanding, but it probably is a testing of the boundary. Mm-hmm. So the joke that is offensive, is a form of like discrimination in some way. It doesn't even have to be sexual or gender based, right? They could be testing the boundaries of like, what's the climate in this place? What can I get away with?
Yeah.
So these are worth addressing. Now, I'm not saying wildly overreact or assume someone's going to get fired for one joking comment. I'm saying human to human, if we're participating in creating the culture of a place, which we are, that's only built by how the humans interact with one another. What you tolerate sends a signal of what can be replicated, right? What we can do again and again. So if a person wants to commit harm, wants to engage in sexual harassment, wants to abuse their power, and every test is not met with resistance, they'll do that, right? They'll do the same thing again, and they're very likely to escalate. So if someone makes the comment, not necessarily like, you look nice today. I'm not saying that that's inappropriate in the workplace. I actually don't know anyone who is saying that that's what we're talking about.
That's correct.
But if they're saying, like if they're grunting or talking about your figure or talking about, certain body parts, and that makes you uncomfortable, then you need to say that makes me uncomfortable.
That's right.
I don't think that's appropriate. Or my favorite strategy that anyone can do, anyone. So no matter where you are on your assertiveness journey, you can do this, I promise. It's just not laugh at the joke.
Yes. Yes. That is so subtle. And lock eyes, just like.
Exactly. Or take it a step further and be like, I don't get it. And make them explain it. I love this. It's actually very funny because you don't have to, this is not a direct confrontation. You're not saying, I think that was an inappropriate comment and here's why. It was sexist. It was, and that feels really insurmountable for a lot of people, right? Now, I mean, if you can confront things directly, please do so. But if you don't feel ready to do that, that's okay. Many people are not. And so this is subtle and indirect, and you don't have to own your intervention. You just don't laugh and create normalcy for the bad behavior. Eye contact is great, okay? Because it could be what? It could be no, like inappropriate.
Really,
all the nonverbals we're communicating. But then the I don't get it, it just hangs in the air.
Yeah.
And either they explain it, which exposes the inappropriate nature of the comment, or they backpedal. But they don't want to be in that moment again. So that's like the easiest thing that you could do. And I need people to do this so much more often because they're waiting for the obvious sign of the thing that's wrong. They imagine that they're going to swoop in and do superhero interventions. Now, most people don't. So this is, you got to know yourself. And we're missing the opportunity here because actually most people are not trying to report things and to get someone fired. They just want the behavior to stop. Well, we actually have a lot of the tools to make it stop at our disposal. And they're very small. And it's nipping it in the bud. It is. Now, if you're going to confront the behavior and you don't want to create conflict in the workplace, which many people do not, the tactic is confront the behavior and not the person. So now listen, I don't care. If someone is doing something to you and you want to call them a jerk, I'm actually fine with that. But if you're not fine with that, if they're your boss, if there's a power differential, strategy's your friend, sure, So then you just don't say you are the bad person. You say, it made me uncomfortable when you said this thing in the meeting. Or it made me uncomfortable when we were talking about my body in the workplace. And I just would be more comfortable if we weren't doing that. And then it can be smoothed over, but it's still a conversation worth having. So they'll say, I was just trying to give you a compliment. And you can be like, I appreciate the compliment, but I'm really here just to work and to focus on work. And so I would be more comfortable. So you can engage in softening your approach. That's not failure in any way. That is acknowledging the realities of the workplace and the hierarchies in the workplace. And maybe you want to keep the job, maybe you want to leave the job, but let's preserve your safety and your well-being through those strategies. And don't be hard on yourself because you didn't say something more directly. These are fine tactics. We're taking care of you in a system that hasn't been great about addressing sexual harassment and assault.
Yes. Yeah. And I want to say it doesn't matter. It's again with these, it only happens to people in a boss dynamic thing. I don't know about you, but I saw the movie Bombshell twice because I thought the power dynamic in that was so strong. And it's like it happens everywhere. It's not like you rise above it somehow. It's that you learn to manage it where you are. And I think that's what Cara's real message is here, is learn to manage it in an empowering way. And so for me, it's like there's got to be a point where wherever you are in this moment, whether you're starting out in your career, whether you've grown up in it, whether you want to take your power back, the fundamental thing that you have that's yours inside of this is the even beginning to say no, even if the illusion is, this is harassment. And if I don't do this, I'll lose my job. And I really need this job. And my family, I'm a single mom and I have all these things and I have a special needs kids and blah, 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 blah. All of the things that you're telling yourself in that moment are disempowering. So here's what I want to tell you. This is the most important thing. Your thoughts are only going to do two things. That's it. They're either going to impair your abilities or empower your abilities. If you impair your abilities, you will feel more trapped inside that dynamic. And this is the point. The first person is you have to look at where you are isn't who you are. So I don't care if you're at the top, where you are isn't who you are. It's a moment in time. And this is the point that she's talking about, whether you're a man or a woman, whether you're rich, poor, whether you have degrees, whether you don't have any degrees at all, it's everywhere. It's prevalent everywhere. And so for this moment, wherever you are, if you're in a stuck place, seek help. Seek help. Make your plan, but don't put it in a place where anybody can find it. Anybody can get you any kind of anything. And if you get to the point where you are in a situation where you are being tested, the waters are being tested, you have to nip the bud at the first sign. If you let it go past that, where she just talked about being in the office and getting with someone who tells an inappropriate joke, I don't care if it's a woman or a man who tells the inappropriate joke, just inappropriate, not interested. If they make a comment about your figure or body parts on you, that's one thing. If they walk by and say, that outfit looks great on you today, or that looks good on you today, because I'm always like, ooh, that blouse looks nice on you. It's a normal comment. It is when they start saying, your ass looks good in those pants. Now you have something you want to nip in the bud. But the thing is, if you're intimidated by a belief in a power structure, you may not say anything. And the second you do, you set a precedent that says, I'm going to escalate one more. Now I'm going to say a more derogatory statement. And I love that you're saying this because we have to be empowered in such a way to say something like that, to say some things about this. I've gotten to the point where I think it's really important for every woman to have an exit plan. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by exit plan is a career exit plan, a marriage exit plan, an exit plan. If there's domestic violence, you need to get out. If there's emotional abuse, you need to get out. If there's something in the workplace that says something right here, I don't feel safe anymore, you need an exit plan. And I think I want to talk about to the woman who is wherever your career is. I mean, when Bombshell came out, that was about the courage these women had to bring it forward. And they were some of the most powerful women in the media industry in that day. And what's interesting, some of them started off like you are, they were attorneys.
Mhm.
And so they knew, and they could see that the thing that was great about that movie was they showed the subtle statements they make, the subtlety of the statements, and they looked, etc. So I think if a woman has a side hustle or learn some form of entrepreneurship, if you have your own money, you have your own life, and you can make your own decisions. And no matter where you are, I do not care where you are. Where you are is not who you are. It doesn't take degrees to become wealthy now. It used to in the past, but now it just takes a little learning on the internet. You can learn wherever you are, you can learn something enough to start getting your own money, and or your own work, your own whatever, and get out. I think one of the things you said, Cara, that really struck me was my mother couldn't leave. It was, the 60s, early 70s. She couldn't leave. And there weren't jobs for her. There weren't, things that are here now. And sometimes the belief that you're stuck is simply a thought.
Mhm.
Last thing, Cara, what if people decide I need to talk to her? I want to talk to her. I want to tell her what can they do, and what do you do for them, and where can they find you? All three questions at once.
Sure. Um, well, yes. And also, definitely, I just want to echo it's because you've seen it. I also agree. An exit plan is a self care plan.
Mhm.
It's just in case. It doesn't mean you're planning on your marriage to fail. Some people are like, that's
That's
not
right.
romantic. I'm like, it's a just in case plan. I hope you never need it. We hope you never need it.
Yeah.
But keep options and build your options. And yes, if you're listening, I am one of your options, I guess. So I do have a website, and it has a contact form. Now, this is not a crisis response, right? So an emergency response, I'm going to have to point you somewhere else. But I am very happy, because this is my life's work. It's a cause and it's a passion, to talk with people, to identify resources, to call other people, to network. It's what I do all day long. So you can find me at caratuttlebell.com. So it's my name, which is, you can see on the screen, but it's CARATUTTLEBELL, caratuttlebell.com. If you Google me, I think you'll find enough information to find your way there. And so it has a contact form there, and also my book and some resources are on that website. But I'm on various social media. So I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, you can find me on Facebook. So I do check all of them, and will reply to you, I promise. And it would just be a conversation about, and we'd start with like, when is a good time for you? Which method of contact feels safe for you? And then you can tell me as little or as much about your situation as you want. So you're in control of your story, you're in control of your plan. It will just be enough information gathering to figure out how it is I can help you. And then I will tell you, what has worked for others before, what my concerns might be about the current plan. And I study this academically, but also do the interpersonal, like, interactions with people. Like, I spoke to a woman this morning who came in to talk about her situation. So we can look at it big picture, or we can think about it anecdotally, and it would be a really case by case personal conversation, because it has to be, for it to be effective.
So do you go into corporations and teach them about sexual harassment? And if you do, tell us about that, and how the companies that are listening right now can get a hold of you as well if they want you to go in and talk.
Yes. So I'm very willing to approach this however the company or employer or person is ready to do so, because we can always start somewhere.
Yeah.
But also, the cultures are just different in different industries, and I get that. I do. So I have prepackaged materials I've used before. I could just come in and go right through that. But ideally, I would do some homework first and figure out, What's going on? Why did you come looking for a speaker?
Yeah.
What are you hoping to get out of that? And it's a mix. It is. It's meant to be empowering, right? And people laugh actually during my programs, and that's okay. It's okay, right? Because we got to like make sure they're comfortable, but they're respectful. And at the end of the day, I am firm on that these things are wrong and shouldn't be happening, and we all have a role to play in changing it. So some of it's public facing, where I do presentations to everyone who works in a place. Some of it, which I always ask for, are not recorded private meetings with the power brokers and the thing where I'm telling them, like, look, this is what you're getting wrong. So sometimes it's consulting, sometimes it's presentations. Sometimes I just share materials or send recommended reading. It just depends what they're asking for. It depends on what they're ready to do. But I am often thanked for my candor. I am doing
Love
the work,
that.
whether I get invited back or not. Because it's important. It's important that someone is saying to them, like, look, this is serious and it's time to get real. And your current approaches aren't working, or you wouldn't have invited me in. And
That's
here's
right.
what I think needs to change. So that's what you get if you hire me. And I'm happy to do it.
I think it's something that's so important. Listen, if you're driving or you're listening in iHeartRadio or Pandora or Amazon Live or wherever you are, relax. All of this is in the show notes, and in the scroll on the conversation, I have put her address, the www.caratuttlebell.com. It's Cara, Cara, Tuttle, Tuttle, Bell, Bell.com. Cara, I have a couple of things I need to say to you.
Yeah.
I want to say thank you. And I mean that like from the teariest part of my little girl inside that had to watch my mom and had to escape with that. Thank you. You're doing some of the hardest real work in the world. You're doing some of the real work that is so important to empower women and empower men on how to do things differently. This isn't about women only. And I think somewhere in the middle that where you are advocating for both sides of the conversation is a skill set that has to have a lot of inner genius and experience. And I want to tell you, I'm really honored that we had this conversation before. I've done almost 600 shows. I've never talked about this, always wanted to. Having to find an expert that is in this. I mean, most people talk about domestic violence and how to get out, but this topic of sexual misconduct and harassment and everything else, it's a touchy topic, and you are extraordinary at what you do. Listen, if you're looking to hire Cara, I would say do it right now, because the benefits of her being in your company and stopping it right now can save you literally millions of dollars and protect your business. Because you know what? They're going to go after the company. They're not going to go after the guy doing the harassment. They're going to come after you. You're the one with the money. So education in this area is about protecting your business, protecting your culture, protecting your brand. It's not just a stupid topic about, oh, don't say this and don't do that. It's literally protecting your brand. If you're tarnished from that, the amount of consumers you will lose, I will tell you, it's huge. Women are 80% of the purchasers right now, and they need to feel safe. They need to feel respected and honored as well. So if you want to protect your business, no matter what you think, you're like, should we have this conversation? Yes. And all you have to do is go to www.caratuttlebell.com and go talk to her. See what she can do for your business. And if you're looking as a woman, I need to talk to somebody, same address, Cara Tuttle Bell. You are not alone. You don't have to do this alone. We have an expert here right on the show, and you can contact her there. So anybody driving and listening, relax. All of it's in the show notes. You can go ahead and get this yourself. Cara, thank you so much for being on the Coffee Break Show. I really enjoyed having you here today.
Thank you so much, Vickie. This is really great. And I'm really, really honored to be here and that you're brave enough to tackle the topic. But of course you are.
Yeah, that's it. So that's today's coffee break show. Next week, we're going to have another really great experts because I bring the best from around the world. And I'm so glad you joined us. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.